One of the most well-known and often quoted verses in the Bible comes from Jeremiah 29. Verse 11 reads, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope in a future." This verse is actually a part of a larger letter Jeremiah wrote to the exiles taken to Babylon by Nebuchadnezzar. While verse 11 is an important verse, there's another statement in this letter by Jeremiah that catches my attention. Earlier in the letter, in verse 7, he writes, "Seek the shalom of the city to which I have carried you into exile. Pray to the Lord for it, for in its shalom, you will have shalom." I like this verse because it shows that, like we see in verse 11, God is concerned with the people's well-being. He desires for them to have shalom. Shalom, this Hebrew idea that is so difficult to capture in just one English word. It can mean peace, completeness, soundness, well-being, prospering, flourishing. It is the way things will be for God's people when God's will is fully enacted in people's lives, in every aspect of their lives, and every aspect of creation. Which is why verse 4 is so interesting. Jeremiah seems to imply that the exiles in Babylon will move closer to shalom as the city, in all its complexity, moves closer to shalom. And so he tells them to seek the shalom of the city. In other words, God's plans to prosper you or me or anyone is connected to the condition of the city, the society, the complex world around each of us. And this is why the practice of holistic mission is so important, particularly as it relates to combating trafficking. So the gospel response to trafficking, it has to be attentive to the well-being and restoration of those victimized by exploitation, abuse, and slavery. And it also has to work toward the repentance and transformation of the perpetrators of this heinous business. But we must also step back to see the bigger picture and realize that the fight against trafficking has to address the complex and systemic causes that allow it to continue in all its ugly forms. Whether that is the way in which poverty and economic oppression create at-risk populations, the way lack of education leaves people vulnerable to deception and manipulation, the way unjust and corrupt geopolitical structures and local governments and law enforcement turn a blind eye to, or even at times take advantage of, this profitable enterprise. The way societies create potential victims by treating certain groups, whether based on gender or nationality or ethnicity, as inferior. The way some victims resolve themselves to mistreatment and abuse because of a lack of access to jobs or health care or housing. I could go on. But the point is that combating trafficking, or better said, the way to bring about shalom for all those affected by trafficking, depends upon a holistic approach to this issue. This is why, with our vision to combat trafficking in Southeast Asia, we decided to partner with two organizations who are committed to a holistic approach. Two organizations who know that it is critical to seek the release of the victims of trafficking and exploitation, who also engage in the long-term, patient work of rehabilitation and restoration for these victims, but who also are committed to preventing trafficking by addressing the complex and systemic causes. And so I want to tell you about them. The first organization is called Eden Ministry. Eden has 3 branches in China focused on rescue and restoration. They've created a successful jewelry business in which former victims make the products and run the businesses. And so the founders of Eden, Soren and Lisa Samuelson, about 4 years ago, they moved to Yangon, Myanmar, because they wanted to have a greater emphasis on prevention. And so Lisa continues to help women coming out of trafficking and sexual exploitation through counseling and personal and community development and job training. and employment through the jewelry business. But Soren, his primary focus is on prevention through community development among at-risk populations. The strategy is to establish community centers where children and teenagers can gather and engage in various programs. 6 months ago, when we entered into this partnership with Eden, they had 2 community centers operating. But thanks to funds from Highland, they have created already in 6 months 2 new community centers. And each of these community centers are led by locals who Soren trains and equips. These community centers offer after-school programs, informal education, clean water and food, job training, particularly through sewing classes, and awareness and advocacy to the families and surrounding community. They also have times of worship and telling Bible stories. The second organization is called Urban Light. It's in Chiang Mai, Thailand, and is the only organization I know of that works with boys and young men who have been exploited in the sex industry. Urban Light was founded 7 years ago by Alexandra Russell, an American, and now has a large staff of Thais who are trained in medicine and counseling, social work, and much more. Urban Light's focus over the years has been serving boys and young men still in the sex industry. Many of these boys are from ethnic minority groups who come to the big city from the mountains to find jobs, to send money back home to support their families. However, they soon find themselves jobless, homeless, and vulnerable. This leads to them being exploited. And so Urban Light reaches out to these boys and shows them that they are loved and cared for. They provide them with medical care and housing, education, training and harm reduction, job opportunities, and much more. And recently, Urban Light has begun focusing on prevention in the Chiang Mai area. They are currently working with 2 at-risk communities at which they help with medical needs and job opportunities and programs for children and awareness and advocacy and a lot more. And one of the cool things is that because they're in Chiang Mai, Urban Light has built a relationship with Ryan and Ning Binkley in the church that they serve there, Chung Doi Church of Christ. And some of the people, the boys and the young men at Urban Light, have gone to cell groups and to church, and Ryan and others from the church have joined activities there. And that relationship is creating opportunity for the church to show love to these boys and young men, and hopefully to be able to share good news with them in the coming weeks and months and years. And so both Eden Ministry and Urban Light understand the need for a holistic approach to combating trafficking. And I'm grateful Highland has the opportunity to partner with them as they seek shalom in their cities.